for this incredible conversation that we're having today about frequencies.
Everything is inherently at its microscopic scale vibrating in a waveform. I just love that transmutation of energy into the material, which then passes on to the next person. And this happens with everything from clothing, money, emotions, etc. You name it. It just passes and transmutes from one thing to another, which is really part of our frequency matrix.
Because you become aware of the energy that is put into the piece that is creating at the moment.
Right, and if you put that love and intention in, that's what's going and transmuting. If you think something, you create a frequency in the field, but then when you speak it, it's actually a greater reverberation. And by creating that sound that then can be heard by others, can then be accepted and transmuted by others, I think that just increases its amplification.
So that's why you feel like frequencies can heal or can hurt a human body.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of studies, even in the scientific world, that have shown that frequencies are constructive and destructive when it comes to interference. Knowing how to overcome the material world through mindset, vibration, breathing, etc., which all controls your frequency.
It's a practice to tune into your own frequency.
It's a daily practice to maintain that frequency as well, I'd say, because there's so many distractions in this realm that it tries to pull you out of it. But if you can maintain it and allow the chaos to go on around you, then you can kind of be at peace and hopefully create the world you want. And that was just this revelation for me, kind of just like, oh, that's how I open up my cup and start filling it with stuff and create abundance.
Welcome to the We Are Healing in Paradise podcast, where we are cultivating the new earth by reconnecting with our true nature and healing the planet from inside each of us. Welcome back to the We Are Healing in Paradise podcast. My name is Kate.
My name is Rosario.
And we are here with our dear friend Josh today. We are in the center of Playa del Carmen. It's a little bit wild, a little bit crazy. It might be a little bit noisy, but tune in for this.
Well, thank you so much for sharing what you're going to share right now.
Thanks for having me.
And Josh and I, we met in the COVID, when it was a COVID. And a lot of people came here in Playa del Carmen because they were like looking for more freedom, or they were looking people in the same mindset. And then we start talking about that, like about everything that you say create like a spell, create like a frequency. And that's why we start doing also like a brand together. Then, I start doing other things, but Josh stay with the brand and doing a lot of clothes because he talks about everything it's related with frequency. So I want to ask you, what do you think about the material world is related with the frequencies?
Well, I think it's all just a big frequency matrix in a nutshell, right? So everything vibrates. Nothing is really at rest. So this plant and this table, it's not really at rest. Everything is inherently at its microscopic scale vibrating in a waveform. So at that point, when everything vibrates, everything holds a different frequency, and everything interacts with those frequencies. And then at certain frequencies, things crystallize, and then they form shapes. And that's kind of what we feel in our material world. When you zoom out a bit, you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's this very big spectrum from radio waves to microwaves, infrared, the visible light spectrum, ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma rays. But the visible light spectrum is this tiny little sliver in the middle of this massive spectrum of frequencies. So all we can see and touch is the visible light spectrum. We can hear sound waves, but then there's a whole gamut of other frequencies around us that we don't really perceive on a daily basis. Now, we've created tools to do X-rays and to detect gamma rays and to test the ultraviolet of something like the sun, or to see in the infrared. But these are things that are imperceivable to us, even though they're around us at all times.
Like the cell phones also.
Like the cell phones and the cell phone towers and the televisions and all the other electronics, they emit a frequency. Now, some frequencies are good and helpful, and some frequencies are bad and damaging, depending on the case and the frequency it's at. And we can see this based on the harmonic solfeggio scales, right? And they talk a lot about how 432 hertz is the pure music hertz, And that one creates a beautiful symmetrical shape when you put it on a frequency plate or a sound plate, and you put a frequency with sand or something, it creates a beautiful symmetric structure. And when you turn it to 440, which our musical instruments have been tuned to since the 1940s, 1950s, well, now it creates a distorted shape. So now you can see that certain frequencies will create symmetry and harmonics and beautiful platonic solids, and other ones will create this distortion in the field. And that's what creates around us at the same time when you distort the field.
And another thing that brought you guys together is your obsession with the frequency in clothing, which I want to touch on as well.
Right, Rosario did bring that up. We first really started talking about, everyone that was here during the COVID time was, if you didn't shut up about what you believed in, you would find your tribe, and then start talking about how frequencies and sound things. And then I always had this thing because I was looking for natural materials, simple designs, and I didn't want all these synthetic fabrics on me anymore. I'd done a lot of research into my health and into then what goes on your body as well is just as damaging to what goes in it. So I went to Rosario, who was making clothes. I go, hey, can you make me a button-up shirt? She goes, yeah. And she came to me several months later. She's like, that was hard. But I found a tailor, and then we went down this journey together, and she helped me find my seamstress, which I have today, who I actually told her, listen, I know energy transfers. This goes also to frequency and how her energy will transfer into the clothing. And I wanted her to put her love and her feeling into each piece. And the first batch she made, each piece was damaged. There was something wrong with it. And I'm like, you were really stressed and rushed. She's like, yeah. I go, I could feel that. And from there, I told her, listen, you need to slow down. You need to put that love that she has. She's like this motherly figure. And I'm like, I want you to put that. Yeah. I want you to put that into the clothing so that when someone puts on a shirt, everything just melts away. And when it comes to guys, I do mostly men's clothing. We don't really like to spend a lot of money on clothes. We're quite frugal in that sense, just a guy thing. But when we see something we like, we buy a lot of it. So I tell people, they're like, oh, how much is it? I tell them it's 1,600 pesos. And every guy's like, oh, yeah, that's a little expensive, grumble, grumble. And then you see them put it on, and it's like my seamstress just gave them this hug. Aww. And they just go, maybe two. And I just love that transmutation of energy into the material, which then passes on to the next person. And this happens with everything from clothing, money, emotions, etc. You name it. It just passes and transmutes from one thing to another, which, is really part of our frequency matrix.
Because you become aware of the energy that is put into the piece that is creating at the moment.
Right, and if you put that love and intention in, that's what's going and transmuting. If you're subconsciously in a bad mood because we're raised in a world that kind of programs us to be in those lower vibrational frequencies, which we'll get to in a little bit, I'm sure, but those things will then transmute. And for a while, my issue with money is because a lot of people will do really negative things, and negative again is a subjective word in the balance of how frequencies are, because there's no real good, bad, they're just is, and there's balance. So quote unquote negative or bad things, what we would perceive in our human form, well, that would then transmute into money, and then it gets passed on to some shopkeeper who holds it in his bank account and doesn't know, and then is holding that energy. You're like, So I had this thing of like, no, I don't want that around. And I subconsciously was pushing that away, even though I was able to get by. But then someone's like, well, you know how to transmute energy, right? I go, yeah. They go, well, just take that negative or whatever energy it's called, transmute it, and do good with it. I'm like, oh. And that was just this revelation for me, kind of just like, oh, that's how I open up my cup and start filling it with stuff and create abundance.
And what do you think about the sound, the music that we're hearing in these days, and the music in the past, or the music in humanity history?
Sound is a fundamental part of our nature. I've always, well, not always, but recently, as I became more aware of how the frequencies interacted with this entire realm that we are interacting in, is that sound creates light, and then light creates physical manifestation. And then I was actually doing an audiobook about how the sound frequency, not sound frequency, but just frequencies interact with us. And it went a lot deeper. And I'll give you guys the link to that on the show notes, and you could share it. It's actually mind-blowing and goes really deep into how your internal frequency, first with your subconscious, then with your conscious, then with your words. It just needs to line up. And the book really goes into, if your subconscious thinks one thing and you're thinking negatively about yourself, but your words of affirmation are in contrary to those things, now you don't just cancel out that frequency, you actually create a distorted frequency in the field. And now people are like, well, why is it not the way I thought? Or it's, a distorted version. And that's kind of what we do, is because we're also trained to be in contradictions in our subconscious through all of the programming that has gone through this world, we second guess ourselves, we put ourselves down, and then we try and do things opposite that with our words or our actions, but somehow they're not in alignment. And that unalignment, that disalignment actually creates this distortion in the field. So to truly manifest what you want, you have to be mind, body, soul, conscious, subconscious, all aligned in the same thing, the same actions, and maintain that for a substantiated period of time. Because if you're just going to go and say, oh, I want this, oh, it didn't work. Well, you've negated, and now you've created a blockage of things not working. I can't, it doesn't. And it's all a mental construct that creates your frequency and your vibration. But back to the sound, I think sound will amplify that. So when you think something, you create a frequency in the field. But then when you speak it, it's actually a greater reverberation. And by creating that sound that then can be heard by others, can then be accepted and transmuted by others, I think that just increases its amplification. And if you look at ancient languages, they created their letters to actually mimic certain shapes. So when you speak, you're spelling and you're creating, and that's where abracadabra comes from, is I create as I speak. So you're literally manifesting and crystallizing forms through your words, which came from your subconscious ideas, but amplified through the sound.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So that's why you feel like frequencies can heal or can hurt a human body.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of studies, even in the scientific world, that have shown that frequencies are constructive and destructive when it comes to interference. And in its simplest form, if you take a waveform, a sine wave, and then you match the sine wave, but you flip it on horizontally or vertically, I don't know, but you flip it on itself, you can see it in the camera, that will cancel each other out. That's how noise canceling earphones work. But if you match the frequency and you just pop it on itself, it actually amplifies it. So for something in your body like cancers or heavy metals or graphene oxides and all of these toxins that we don't want, we know the energetic signature and the energetic fingerprint of all of these materials. So now there's machines that can scan your body, match the frequency, invert the wavelength, and then just literally vaporize those things inside your body. So then it'll give your body a chance to flush it out a lot easier. Or on the opposite, you can say, oh, I want more muscle mass. So you find the energetic fingerprint, you match it, and you can actually amplify things in that sense. It's to that level. And if you really want to go crazy, you can do it all with your mind. Your mind can do all these things. And we've seen so many evidences. Someone like Wim Hof, who had poison injected into himself, survived. And it's like, oh, give me 30 random people in 2 weeks and I'll train them to do the same thing. And it's the mind that controls
a lot of discipline in the mind.
Yeah.
To get into that state.
But it took him 2 or 3 weeks of training of these randoms, and they all were focused to the point of knowing how to overcome the material world through mindset, vibration, breathing, etc., which all controls your frequency.
Mm-hmm. So it's possible to tune into your own frequency. It's like, how do you tune into your own frequencies?
I mean, I guess the best way to do that is to first sit in silence and observe yourself, right? Because when you're in silence and there's nothing distracting you, the things that keep popping up and cycling through over and over again are the things that are going to be in your subconscious and likely affecting your overall frequency. So if you're constantly putting yourself down or self-loathing or self-sabotage or any of those things that I can't, this and that, those things will put you at a lower frequency, a lower vibration. So what you want to do is find out what is causing those and cure those traumas, let them go. I was reading this book as well that talks about how, a lot of people avoid their shadows, but the ancient mystics would actually find their own personal shadow, give it a name. By giving it a name, you give it form. By giving it form, you take control. And by taking control of it, you can then dispel it, you can mutate it, transmutate it, you can do whatever you want with it. And that was how some of the ancient mystics thought of curing one's own traumas. Because we all have trauma. We've come probably many lives to this realm, and the things that cycle over and over again are things that you are vibrating at, and you are attracting those things. So also observe what's going on around you. If the same cycle is happening over and over again, go, okay, well, what am I attracting, and why am I attracting that, and what about me is tuned to that frequency, and how do I change that? And then you would do work to tune your frequency in other ways, to get rid of what that is, and then add more affirmations and more positive thought and more stillness. There's many ways to get there, but it's practice.
It's a practice to tune into your own frequency.
It's a daily practice to maintain that frequency as well, I'd say, because there's so many distractions in this realm that it tries to pull you out of it. But if you can maintain it and allow the chaos to go on around you, then you can kind of be at peace and hopefully create the world you want, because only then, when you're in your own alignment, can you create well and properly. Otherwise, like I said before, you get the distortions.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Wow, we could have this conversation go on for hours because Josh is a wealth of wisdom. He did an incredible talk on frequencies at La Canopée not too long ago, and we know he's going to have another talk soon. So as always, we invite you to come join us here in Playa del Carmen, where all the conscious people are coming and gathering, and come be a part of our community and our tribe that we're building. We'll definitely have Josh on for another podcast in the future. So leave us a comment. Let us know if you have questions for him about frequency, what you want to hear in the next podcast about frequency. We're going to share those resources that you mentioned in the show notes in the description box below. If you're listening to us, please give us a good rating. Please share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. Please leave us a comment and share this podcast with your friends, because we want people to know that it's possible to heal naturally by connecting with nature with things as simple as dialing into your frequency. We're grateful that you're here and you're part of our community, and we will see you next week.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Josh.